So today we are going to embark on our two-part series of toxic boomer financial advice. Essentially, things that I think don't really work anymore. Okay, I've established in the early part of the podcast, which pretty much is your opener, I've talked a little bit about where do your decisions come from. So your personal experiences will inform a certain way of thinking, a certain way of thought, and a certain belief that then translates into the way you do things. So let us set a little bit of context. What kind of environment did a lot of these boomers grew up in, right? So they grew up in a time when there was a lot of inequality. Yeah, why do I say so? Because I'm a firm believer that Singapore is not a kampong. It's been centuries since we were a mega port in this part of the world, right? So all your traders from different parts of the Indonesian archipelago and your colonial powers, they came here to trade. Of course, eventually your colonial powers took over the place. Okay, so on the backdrop of colonialism, none of them came for nation building, which is why you don't see them colonizing places that are poor and broke. They only go to get the riches and they want to own and control trade hubs and be the monopoly. Right? We're not a fishing village for a very long time. We have been a port for a very, very long time. So the boomers probably grew up in a time when there were a lot of coolies, there were a lot of all these Hong Tou Jing, there were a lot of people that were just like very, pretty much menial laborers, right? So a lot of laborers, and they grew up in such an environment. So when they grow up in such a backdrop where there's a lot of inequality, they do hard labor to survive, there is basis for it because that is the backdrop that they grew up in, which then informs their views, right? But when you wind all the way to today, where a lot of us are working white-collar jobs, or at least are not like slave labor, okay? We can debate on the modern slavery, blah, 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 but that's not the podcast here today, right? So with this backdrop of white-collar job, having a lot of surpluses, looking for quality over quantity, not talking about starvation, thinking about legacy and trying to build the longer term. A lot of the advice that the older people are giving us, they don't work anymore, right? So a lot of the advice that the older people were giving us, they don't work and they may be a bit more problematic. Okay, so with this backdrop, I'm going to give you point number 1 of toxic boomer financial advice that I think needs to be called out. Number 1 is do not waste food. Money very hard to make. So I don't deny at that point in time, food was probably very scarce. You know, you look at the kind of things that people were dining. At least in a lot of the documentaries, as a coolie, what do you really want to have, right? So you don't really have a lot to go around. So yeah, food is hard to come by. And with that in mind, don't waste food. It's very understandable. But today, this idea has morphed into a treasure trove of weird little ideas. Okay, like you see people going to feast, they lim jiu, right? Or they go for those kind of like company dinner, and you always hear this line. The old people will say, young people eat more. Don't waste food. Young people can eat more, should eat more. And this is very interesting because it's a good mix of celebration and also this underlying belief that food is hard to come by, should not waste. But actually, the whole thing that they were doing is wasting food because it is celebratory. They were just splurging. They know that everything that we've ordered here cannot be finished to begin with. This weird idea then harbors around in our train of thought, right? Don't waste food. And I hear a lot of young people talking about it. Firstly, if you really don't want to waste, order less. Secondly, if you're going to consume excessively, just know that you can not waste food. Over a prolonged period of time, it's going to affect your body and it's going to bump up your medical bills. I'm very sure about this. There's a lot of studies that show over-calorie intake and unhealthy diets. So all these things you don't really need me to tell you anymore, right? The very basis of don't waste food is not about finishing what is on the plate. It's about not ordering more to begin with and recognizing that there is the feasting culture and there's the day-to-day consumption. And during the day-to-day consumption, hey, don't order so much lah. Don't. Why cai peng must have 3 dishes? Why can't it be 2 dishes? Perfectly fine. Adjust the way of thought. Drop this whole idea of not wasting food. Order what is enough. Take care of your body. Right? That is way more important and way more impactful on your finances than that, 3 extra mouth of grains just to please the people around. Which brings me to point number 2. You get what you pay for. Pricier is better. 一分钱一分货, 本钱, blah 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 blah. So I'm sure you've heard all these kind of stuff, right? Where there's this core belief that the more expensive something is, the better quality it is. Which by now, I think in our generation, a lot of people do harbor these ideas, right? It's there, You see it in the way people spend, you see it in the way people look at things. I mean, there's so much study around this, that the way you price, right? How you price yourself, right? If you price within this benchmark, then you are like, you're in the red ocean. There are a lot of people here. You must price very, very high, premium, separate yourself, differentiate. There's a whole bunch of study around these things, and let me give you a different view of pricing mechanisms, okay? From a business person's point of view, to be fair, there are 3 broad criteria in pricing. Number 1 is the cost to produce, right? So it's cost of goods, right? Pretty much end to end. This idea, like for us, when we do content, our hardware to the time that I spend on recording, researching, and post-producing with the team, the product that comes out, right? This is the cost to produce the end product. Research, record, post, go out. So there's end-to-end manpower costs, and pretty much manpower cost, some hardware, but manpower cost is a cost to produce, number 1. Number 2 is the cost to different something tea set, right? Or you want a nicer view, right? You do varnish, right? Like what's the difference between this tea set and a more chachak tea set? They both make tea, right? Cost of goods to produce is the same, but we differentiate. So we have used atas ingredient, atas varnishing, right? The finishing must be better. So cost to differentiate is a big thing, okay? And some is hardware, some is marketing, right? Like to put yourself out there, be different. There's so much going into cost to differentiate. And number 3 is the cost to acquire you. Right? So it can be a storefront, it can be a big sale, it can be online. It's multiple ways to acquire you as a customer, right? So which is why there are all these platforms online. You can start your own online shop, walk into a store. There are many, many ways. So these 3 pretty much forms the pricing mechanism, right? Cost to produce, cost to differentiate, and cost to acquire. And when you think about this, right, most of the premium comes from cost to differentiate. Okay, not cost to produce, neither is it cost to acquire. Cost to acquire pretty much the same. If you go to, let's say you go to Shopee, Lazada, you go to this store versus that store, the cost to operate the store is pretty much the same. Doesn't matter which store you go to. Right? Same with if you go to a shop next to each other, like both of them in the hawker center, this one sell kueh peng, the other one also sell kueh peng, chicken rice. It's the same. Cost to acquire you as a customer is pretty much the same, and the cost to operate is pretty much the same. It is the cost to differentiate that comes in. It's very exciting, very interesting. And when they try to differentiate, they can charge you a much higher price. Yeah. So over time, I've learned to try to look at things from essentially the good itself, right? So where is this thing coming from? What is the composite of this thing? Let's say you buy facial stuff, or you try to buy cleansers. Find the active ingredient, try to find out what's going on, right? So as you learn more about where do these things come from, what happens to get to this place, you can kind of sniff away the cost to differentiate. And then you start to realize that actually this thing and that thing, this is $50, that is $500. The only thing is because, they get, I don't know, Zoe Tay or Fan Wong or whoever these days to be like, do a post like that. But anyway, when you start to think of it this way, like they can be the same leather, how much better can the leather be? Really? Leather technology got changed? Or never. It's the same shit. Find out what you need, find out how things are done, and just go for the quality product that doesn't spend a lot of money to try to differentiate itself. You get what you pay for. The truth is, you don't really get what you pay for, you get what it's priced at. Right, there are a lot of other things that are within this price mechanism, and it's not that pricier is better. Which brings me to point number 3, and that is study hard, get a good job, your life will be great. Okay, this is the mantra. Okay, this is like the epitome of boomer financial advice. Go and ask anyone that tells you that. Have they studied hard? Do they have a good job? Do they think they have a good life? Most of them will say no. a lot of people that give you this advice, I'm not saying everyone, a lot of people that harbor this thought and give you this advice come from a position of a lack. That means they have not been there, they have not done that, they have not tried it. So all that they can tell you is a position of fear. There's a lot of fear because they are an envy, right? They look at their friends, wow, like my boss, like wow, university grad now, like doing very well, or like, my friend's son, blah, 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 right? So it's a lot of this idea of the grass is greener on the other side. If you've talked to people that actually studied, actually tried very hard to get a good job, and tried very hard to live a good life, they will not simplify it. So my disdain for this advice, this toxic boomer advice, is not in the inherent idea of you should study hard, you should try to get a good job and live the best life that you can live. I am not against this trajectory. I am annoyed by the packaging of this thing. So this is the very smooth packaging that doesn't exist. You study hard, you really got to be very, very, you got to be creme de la creme to get the kind of scholarship, to again be helicoptered. I'm sure you've met some of these people. They've been helicoptered around, you look at them, really? You really better than me? I've just taken a longer path. The idea here is not to say, oh, you shouldn't study hard or you shouldn't do your best to live a good life, because hey, I think it's great. I think it is great to give your best to live the best life that you can have or you want to have, right? What is so problematic about pursuing to the best of your abilities and pursuing your goals and dreams? I don't have any problems with that. My qualm is the simplification of it. Right? So recognize that study hard, great, good on you, you get good job. You get study hard, great, you get good grades. Period. Good grades doesn't mean you get good job. That's a different ladder altogether. You got to play around with the job market, understand when you can negotiate for price, who should you jump to, what is your company doing, do they have a growth trajectory? If they have a growth trajectory, can you join it? If they don't have a growth trajectory, maybe you should jump. I'm very annoyed when people say, oh, I survived 3 restructuring. If a company goes through 3 restructuring, you better be at the top. If not, out you go. Okay, don't waste your time there. So the job market is the different market. And then by extension, the life, right? The life that you want to create, the things that you want to do, the whole understanding of the self, that is a different ballgame altogether. They are not one package. And when you can separate them, it gives you more peace, I feel. I mean, I'm a big believer of clarity, right? The clearer you get, the better life is, in my view, right? It's not because definitely your life will be better, but at least you don't get stuck in this warped reality that if you do this, you get that, right? And to me, this is a very toxic boomer financial advice. Right? At the end, it's about make money, live a good life. So to me, that's a financial advice. So this is the first part, okay? And in closing, I just want to say that I am not judging boomers, or I'm not against them as a collective, right? It's weird. It's like they judge millennials, and then I judge them. I'm not that. I'm just trying to find out where do these ideas come from, okay? And some are a little bit clearer than others, and some are not. But at the same time, point out that some of these things are not very logical, oversimplified, coming out of fear, and also some are not contextual, right? That means they are not as useful where we are today, trying to live our life, right? Our goals are different, our context is different, the way we see things have changed, right? And for the better or for the worse, that's an open discussion. Okay, so this is part 1. I will come back with part 2, but I'm going to sum up part 1. These 3 toxic boomer financial advice that I feel we should be more cognizant and kind of move away from it. Number 1 is do not waste food. Money is very hard to make. Firstly, I don't know if money is hard to make for you, but I have a tendency to believe that it is not. If not, you will not be spending a lot of time to think of how to invest your surplus, be smarter with money. You must have money to start to think about all these things, right? So I don't think it's that hard for you. But this idea of not wasting food over a prolonged period of overconsumption can cause a lot of bodily health issues that you probably shouldn't do it, and you shouldn't mix the whole feasting basics, right? Like the feasting climate back to your daily life, right? It's just order less, eat what is enough. Don't need to be the same as everyone else. Eat what is enough for you. You really don't want to incur long-term health issues and long-term cost of health. Number 2 is you get what you pay for. Pricier is better. Of course, by now we've established that it is not the case. There are many things that go into why something is priced in a certain way, which we can keep talking about there. I'm going to share with you more about how people get you to spend more, right? So I'm going to talk about some of these things, right? So how companies do it. But the base idea is pricier is not exactly better. Wood is wood, leather is leather. people spend a lot of money to differentiate themselves, right? Learn about the products that you're gonna buy and eventually pay the price that you're comfortable with. Okay, Pricier is not exactly better. And number 3 is study hard and get a good job. Your life will be great. That is not how things work. It is not about not studying hard, not getting a good job, not living a great life. No, it's just not so easily connected. It's 3 different games that you want to play, and great, good on you if you're doing a good job. But if not, hey, don't blame yourself. It is not a linear trajectory. Those things are not realistic. So with that, I hope you learned something useful today. See ya!